So hi everybody, my name's Jason Stall. I'm based in the UK and I'm the global lead for K-12 for Esri, and I'm really happy today to be facilitating these sessions. And we've got some great talks today from Aaron, Kate and Brett, all experienced users of GIS and some really interesting applications of GIS, as the topic says, get creative. And first up is Aaron from Mary Noel Father School in Hong Kong. Talking about some things that are close to my heart, really. Things looking at some sort of AR and VR and drones and this type of thing, and how we're actually using things like story maps to integrate these into a teaching sort of experience. So, Aaron, I was going to hand over to you, so you can share your screen if I stop sharing.
Yes, can I share the screen? I can't share the screen yet. Oh yeah, that's great.
There we go.
Okay, let's get started. Okay, can everyone see that? Yep.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Let's get started. Okay, so this is my story in Hong Kong. I'm using the GIS and story map for teaching geography to our students. My story is not that long. It's just quite a bit integrated with a lot of stuff. So let's get started with this one. Actually, in the 2003, the Hong Kong Education Bureau asked us to use the GIS to teach geography as part of the new senior secondary curriculum. Therefore, the GIS was being used in Hong Kong around maybe nearly 20 years, but it's not worked that well in the first few 10 years. So we need to have some adaptation and change. Therefore, I try to integrate into all-in-one approach. I would call it the iPad model. iPad is not the one that we use for the tablets, but it's forming the four letters starting with the information, processing, analyzing, and also the data integration. And I think this is one of the integrating platform that my students can learn through GIS. So let's start. My story begins at this small lab. It's a geotechnical lab. You can see that my students are working on some digital map with 3D analyzing tools. But this is only the beginning. I try something new, using the 360 panorama cameras to give them like the VR mode. And also I started to use some drone videos, and I can put all of this stuff onto this platform to enhance the learning experience for the geography in Hong Kong. So what I'm doing here is trying to integrate all of them by using the GIS story map. And because GIS story map can able us to use the multimedia stuff, and so I integrate all of them into it. Sorry about the Chinese because we are using a Chinese platform. So, but it's still this is a story map. So I will tell you more about my story with 4 examples. First of all, the first example is from the actually it's the partner with the Hong Kong Esri, that we try to use some the story map or the map, the living atlas stuff to integrate the content with Hong Kong's education, the compulsory topics of the Hong Kong senior secondary education curriculum. What we did is we tried to use like the already made map to create a free web-based learning environment for our students, especially in the when we are like working as home during the COVID-19 condition. And we can bring them to different parts of the world through this living atlas. Let's say the tropical rainforest. We never are able to fly over there during the COVID-19 pandemic, but we can use these living analysts to give them first-hand, or well, I would say the virtually first-hand experience to learn through the web map. And of course, there will be some like worksheets for them to do it by their own. Then I think it's quite interesting for them to learn by themselves. The second story is the virtual field trip. Okay, you will see that I create some virtual field trip for the processing unit. Well, what I mean by processing? Well, in Hong Kong, the students, like a lot of places, we need to do some field work. But also because of the pandemic, all the field works are suspended. So I try to use the function of the GIS, let's say the digital map, to provide them their field study sites onto the virtual environment. And then I put some of the drone videos. You may see that over here. Maybe I need some time to load that video, but you will see that it's a drone. And also you can see that on the right-hand side, top right-hand corner, this is a very remote island from the mainland of Hong Kong. So my student can go to some of the remote places using the 360 panorama and also the drone footage. They can do a quite unique field experience. Let's say here we get like sea cave. I can draw some of my diagrams over the photos and then just wipe it out. And you can see that my student, sorry about the Chinese, but you can see the student can learn it by copying or through learning from the web. And they can study that through some virtual field work. And it is quite useful. So the government just share some of the story maps to the rest of the Hong Kong schools. So you may download it from here. You can see the website later on. The third one is about the analyzing. The analyzing is not the stuff that we are talking about, like, oh, we need to analyze the buffering stuff or doing the vector calculation. We just use some aerial photo, like some here you can see that there's an old and new one. We compare it through the study and through a project study like this one. Actually, my students are doing a field work, and because the virtual environment enable us to analyze the data through 3D. Actually, this is from the sorry about the Chinese as well, but this is from the ArcGIS Earth. We can use it like building the 3D buildings and create a 3D environment, so that virtual 3D environment actually can make it into the real model to scale down, and they just use that model to 3D clean it out and also make it into modeling stuff, put it into the sandbox and try that model. So we can come up with some solution about the heat island effect nearby our school community. You just create some new tools that can cool down the school rooftop. So this is quite interesting. Also, this is quite fun, working onto the 3D environment. Last but not least, I use the data integration system for like the survey 1, 2, 3 to combine the field works with the real actual data with my junior forms students. What they did is they went to the central of Hong Kong and they used the digital map from the survey 1, 2, 3 and entered the data in the survey 1, 2, 3. You can see that although they are Chinese, but you can see that the student can enter it through the tablets during doing the fieldworks. And what they did is they just using the tablet, you can see over here, and they are gathering some field work information. And after the entering the fieldwork information, then we can group them together, because the survey 123 can directly output the data like the right hand side. And then what I did is I just combine all of the different data gathered by my students and group them into a big data. So it is quite very useful for us to have some big data analysis. Although they are just a junior form students, they can do a very, very minor big data analysis. And after that, one of my students create a model of the using those big data, create a model of like Hong Kong's skyline. And so what I did is I try to gather all information that my student needs and group them into the big data. And also we want to use the data to teach them to facing the 21st century map reading skills, because everyone know that no one's using the paper maps for the map readings. So this is just a story that begins in Hong Kong, and I'm looking forward to have more people to generate their story map and go through this GIS journey with the information processing, analyzing skills, and data integration. And of course, hopefully I can share this story to all of you guys around the world that can inspire everyone to share the geospatial data education system. So this is my sharing, and thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you much indeed. We'll come back to some questions on that. It's really, really interesting. Lots of
okay, thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you very much indeed. And thanks for keeping to time as well. That's really, really important. So with that in mind, he says,
is it I need to share back or not?
I'm just going to share my screen now, so I think we should push that across. So we've got Dr. Kate Poche, who's going to be talking about using ArcGIS Online as sort of as a way to break down sort of maybe some sort of social integration. Actually, introduce people, I think. So let's find out. So, Kate, I'm going to stop sharing.
Yes, I will go ahead and start sharing myself. Let me get the right one going. Here we go. Okay, this one should be right. Okay, so hopefully you're all seeing a slide that says the G stands for get to know you.
Yep.
Yes. Okay. All right. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night for a lot of you. I'm lucky I'm in a more normal time than most of the people who are stuck on this in the middle of the night. So for me, it's only just afternoon here in Pennsylvania. So I'm very fortunate that the timing has worked out very well. So welcome, glad to see you. So for us, we're doing something a little lighter weight. For the G stands for get to know you. And of course, we all know what the G is. The G is the G on GIS. So I'll just move right in and introduce who our people are. Come on. I will tell you, I'm doing something very exciting that I'm actually presenting in Google Slides when I usually always use PowerPoint. So there we go. Okay, I'm moving right along. So our introductions. So we're a collaborative group. I am Kate Popejoy. I am affiliated somewhat with Lehigh University, but I do not work for them. Dr. Tom Hammond and our grad student Doug Leeson are at Lehigh. We have two other universities that we're working with across the United States. The other one being Texas Christian University, which is in Fort Worth, Texas, and then Washington State University, Tri-Cities, which is in the south central part of Washington State. It's not on the wet side, over on the water side, it's in the dry side. And each of our universities has two high schools that we're working with. Our two high schools, one is in Philadelphia and one is in Wilmington, Delaware, not very far apart. For those of you who don't know US geography, different states mean very little up here. They're very small. So often we have things very close together. So Wilmington to Philly is about an hour and about an hour and a half away from us, to give you some geographic references. We're building on a previous NSF grant that we had. This is a current NSF grant. We just finished year one of a 4-year grant. We did an earlier 3-year I-test grant with NSF in a high school here in Allentown in Pennsylvania, which is very close to Lehigh. And then we're expanding it across the country, doing some different things with different places. So this presentation relates to some of the work that we did with our Philadelphia and Wilmington high schools. The high school in Philly is Lankenau High School. It's a STEM magnet school. And the school in Wilmington is Alexis I. DuPont High School. We have teachers at both of those schools, but the ones we're focusing on now today are Erica Stefanovich at Lankenau, and then Stashana Carter and Ian Hansen, who are out at DuPont. All of our work takes place with ninth graders. So in the year of COVID, here in our area, ninth grade is the first year of high school. So all these kids who were starting school last year, many of them had never even set foot in their high school, and then we're immediately doing everything from home. So imagine, trying to go to class with kids you've never seen before, maybe a couple of them from middle school if you're lucky, and you're at home and you've never even been in the building. How on earth do you build any student cohesion, class cohesion, get to know each other when everyone is a stranger to each other and they're not even in the same space? So what we're trying to do with this, we're doing a lot of really interesting things with curriculum. How do you embed GIS tools into different curricular areas like science and social studies, math, other things like that. In this particular case, the classes that we're working with at DuPont.
Okay, sorry. Okay, can I just make sure the full screen's been sharing? So I think we're getting a mixture of, I think, your speaker notes and the slides. So the slides are small on one side. Is that what it's supposed to be?
No, it's supposed to show you as presenter. So let me switch out let me switch that out. Sorry about that.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
That's okay. This is what happens when I'm working with something new.
I've never used Google Slides, so I was thinking, is that what it is? Yeah. So.
Yeah, it's supposed to show you presenter view, and I don't know why it's not doing that. So let me do this. This is why I should.
Thanks, Peter. Yeah. There we go.
In PowerPoint. I know. Okay. I prefer PowerPoint. In my copy, I was like, oh no, we can do slides. Thanks, Tom. I'm going to pay you back later on that one, buddy. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so now you should be able to just see the slide. All right, thank you. Okay, so normally we embed GIS tools into the curriculum. At DuPont, it's biology classes. Both Shoshana and Ian teach biology classes and also environmental ed. And in this particular case, at Lankenau, it's our social studies teacher we're working with here. And so she wants to do things like community mapping, units conducted with GIS, things like that. But the first thing we have to do is figure out how to build classroom cohesion. How do we build rapport? How do we get these kids to even think about gathering data at home that they're going to share rather than doing it in school? So our teachers, after going through regular PD over the summer about how do you embed in your curriculum, came up with a creative way to bridge these two ideas. How do you get GIS introduced, and how do you get these kids to build rapport? Okay, so if you'll go to my next slide for me nicely now. There we go. I don't like how it's doing this, but anyway, okay. So what our teacher in Lankenau did in Philadelphia, she had the students fill out a quick questionnaire about themselves. And one of the questions she asked them is, do you like Brussels sprouts? And usually that has a pretty strong opinion, even amongst adults. If we did that today, probably about 3 or 4 people would say, yeah, I like them. And the rest of them are like, ugh, I don't like them. So, kind of a humorous question. And you can see here, it's mapped out as to where these kids live, right? So one thing to remember too, so a lot of these kids are really spread out in Philly. Now she asked other questions too, like what's your least favorite subject? Do you like to be inside or outside? Those types of things. But in this case, we chose to use the Brussels sprouts one. Okay, so let me tell you a little bit more about that one. Okay, so this is clever to have these students do this. Instead of doing a paper survey, which she usually did in her classroom, we're getting the kids to think about the GIS interface. We're getting them to do some pattern seeking with spatial analysis. They're going to use some tools to use clustering to see what's happening and get to figure out a little bit about the geography of Philadelphia. And that's no easy feat. Philadelphia is a very interesting and complex city with a lot of interesting features. I'm a relatively recent transplant to the area myself, so I'm still learning a lot of Philadelphia geography, so I was grateful for doing this as well. And then also the students got to know their classmates. You imagine, again, these kids not knowing each other, ask them some funny questions and see what they find out about each other. And also an opportunity for the teacher to say, listen, some kids like things and some people don't. So sometimes you just have to be tolerant of the fact that some people like things that you don't, and vice versa. And this works okay when the students are at home, which was a big deal for us, well, for everybody. Okay, So in this case in Philadelphia, what the teacher did is she had them do a Google form. She did not introduce anything with Collector yet or Survey 123. And then she moved the data from the Google form onto the map. And then the students worked with maps and did some tool stuff with the maps. So the teachers over in Wilmington said, hey, this is a pretty cool idea. Let's do something like it, but a little bit different. So they chose to do their data input using Collector, which of course is now field maps. They had a collector built for each class so that students could compare across the classes as well. And then the students inspected their map. So here is an example of that. Okay, in this case, we only have 3 classes chosen, right? So it's not everybody, but some of the questions they asked, do you have siblings? What do you like to do for fun? What is something you do well? This particular student said, I eat well. Okay, that was an easy choice. What are you most afraid of? In this case, drowning. What would you like to learn about? How to cut open a frog. So kind of some personal questions, but also some content questions about what they hope to learn in their class. So kind of a little different twist on the same idea. Okay, so our takeaways. This is a great introductory tactic for the beginning of the year. I think all of our teachers will do the same thing again this coming year, even if the students are face-to-face in the classroom. They'll do something quite similar. That's my guess. Pretty engaging for the students. Got a pretty decent buy-in compared to some of the things we did later in the year. Quite a few students participated. We call them data selfies. You know, it's a chance for the kids to kind of talk about themselves, which is important. There were a lot of interesting hooks for the teachers to work from. It was a social thing, of course, but doing some stuff with GIS, looking at geospatial orientation and their awareness. But the important thing is like, yay, this is very successful, but be careful where you go from here. Build from here slowly. Okay. Here's an example of what the teacher tried to do at Lankenau Next. She thought, aha, let's work with census tract data. Let's get really involved in the different populations of Philadelphia and do a lot more fancy moves with the mapping. It did not go well. It was too much. It was too steep a hill for these kids to climb next, right? So again, don't be discouraged. It's another one of our parts of this too. Start off easy, keep working your way up easily. So a few more takeaways. There was some expertise required, but there were some options. So for example, the teacher who used the Google form, she'd done a little work with GIS before, so she was comfortable just importing that into a point layer. So that's one way of going for it. Another way is to start up a collector of field maps and do a point layer, which our teachers now know how to do pretty well. And then also we could create a view layer, which was important. The students were reporting data from home. And sometimes you don't want people to be able to see that address. So we could work on making a view layer that did not have those data points accessible so that the students could still have their location masked to a certain point. And of course, our GIS specialist, Jeremy Mack, was the one who helped us learn how to make a view layer, along with our grad student, Doug Leeson, who figured that out. And I put a little picture of Jeremy in the corner so you all can see Jeremy and wave at Jeremy. He's probably like, I can't believe she did that. Okay, so New Horizons, what are we going to do next? Well, the psychology teacher in Texas heard a bit about this and had 3 weeks after the AP test had been finished and the students had kind of, quote, free time to do things. He did something with mood and emotions with this. He used Survey 123, and he had students talk about or think about places they traveled to and places in their own neighborhood, and what was their mood in those areas. Were they happy, relaxed, anxious? Were you by yourself? Were you, were you with other? This is one particular student. Featured here, you can tell the colors on the left. Of course, relaxed is red. I probably would make relaxed blue, but that's me. Different colors, right? In this particular case, a student had traveled to Mexico and was very relaxed. First time out of the country, which is good, but with a bunch of family. That's probably what made it relaxing. Okay, sounds like fun. And he'll probably continue doing this next year because he'd already done some stuff with mood mapping before. All right, and so if you want more information on this, we have all of our materials from the precursor grant. Lots of interesting topics like looking at urban trees, urban heat island, lots of different things. And then we have our current grant reading materials and personnel. We'll be doing more and more stuff. We just finished our first year, so we're moving on. And you can always email us if you have any other questions. And I think my colleague Tom is going to put those 2 links in the chat so that people can find them more easily. All right, and that is the end for me. I will stop my share.
Fantastic, thanks, Kate. I really like the idea of data selfies. We'll come back to
that.
Yeah, I'm going to steal that, definitely.
Yeah, it definitely is. It was a lot of fun and something we didn't teach them to do. That's what was cool about it. The teachers were like, oh, I'll just do this. Yeah, so I think
the idea of in field work, you usually go and take measurements in the field or something, but actually, if you actually get, it's the kids you are measuring in their location.
Yeah.
That's the thing. That's a really good, and it's about them, so they know about them. It's easy for them to do that. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. It's a very easy entry task, and definitely, yeah. There are a lot of fun questions you can ask to show that you have a sense of humor, which is really important at the beginning of the year with a teacher to establish that rapport.
Yep, definitely. So I'm just making. So thank you, Kate. So moving on to Brett. I'm hoping that's your slide on the screen, Brett.
Yeah, that's it, mate. Thank you.
That's cool. Great stuff. And again, so we're going to come back to actually this idea of actually what do we do to break down barriers, and sort of, again, Kate was talking a bit about actually creating this sort of on-ramp for students. How do we keep iterating and breaking down, looking at what's not working and change it in there, and developing great skills for students. So I think Brett's going to talk to us about his experiences in Brisbane. So I'm going to stop sharing, Brett. And
okay, thank you, mate. Let's go. Can you see that?
Yep.
Yep, awesome. Hey, everyone. I'm Brett Dascombe, and I'm very similar to Aaron and Dr. Popejoy with my journey. I'm going to show you a story map that I've created with a lot of embedded students' work in it. So I'll just go through that. I've shared the links for everyone, so this is made public, so everyone can access it in the chat there as well. So I'm from Brisbane, Australia. I'm from a state high school, 1,800 students, year 7 to 12, and we were established in 1959. This is our school in northern suburbs of Brisbane. So it's, yep. We use a lot of different technologies in our classroom, in our geography classroom in particular. We've started using YouTube. We've used ArcGIS drones as well on field trips. So we're using a lot of different data sets. I steal the equipment from the science department, the SparkView, and I take that out on field trips and always bring it back to them in working condition, which is nice. Our journey started back in 2006 with my ArcMap and ArcGIS. We used it in assessment in senior geography to create maps. And in 2018, we migrated to ArcGIS Online and story maps. And this is one of the first projects one of my students created on North Stradbroke Island, and is one of the most stunning pieces of work still that they've produced. It's got embedded Indigenous video in it, maps, all sorts of stuff. And if we just click on it, you can hopefully see. So we went over to the island and spent 2 days over there gathering data. It used to be a sand mining island, and she even embedded a really neat, I hope you can hear that. So you can see that the students created a really sophisticated piece of work. In year 11, we had a new syllabus written, and I was part of that. And we decided at Wavell to embed story maps into the senior syllabus. And these are actually assessment pieces that the students have created. They're all accessible on the website that you can access. So I think I'll just scroll through these quite quickly because obviously we're a little bit time poor, but in year 10 we did a field trip to Bribie Island, another island just near Brisbane, and the students got to look at erosion on the Bribie Island. They also got to look at a bridge that was built in 1963, a year before I was born, and hasn't been upgraded since. So obviously there's traffic issues there as the population's increased. These were submitted into the Australian Spatial Science competition in 2020, and this particular one took out second place in Australia. Another one of the students did a project on microplastics on the beach, and we photographed slides under a microscope and place them into the actual assignment as well. So these students are now in year 12 in my school, and they've done story maps all the way through as assessment pieces. These are just a couple more on deforestation. This is a year 7 project that we did on the local creek in our school grounds. This took out first place in the Australian Spatial Science competition. These are all accessible on this story map, and then we moved into year 12. This was really exciting because this student won the geography prize at our school, but she also was the first, the North Stradbroke story map, and this was her final piece of assessment in senior, and she got 25 out of 25 for this, as did the other young gentleman who did this. Now, I submit these to the Queensland Curriculum Authority as assessment pieces, but they don't take web pages, so I have to video record them, which has been a bit of a revelation. I use a gamer's OBS studio to record the story maps, and I annotate the marking over the top and send them into the Curriculum Authority as their senior piece of assessment. And it's worked really, really well. We've actually had a lot of other schools want to do that. Now, in 2020, I made a bit of an error. We do ecological hazards, and I looked at COVID, and the students got really lost in the data. There was so much data, it was just quite incredible. And but they still did really good projects, like really good, solid projects, and some really clever mapping, particularly with the data that was available. They got to choose a country, Italy, USA. I modeled India for them. So that was a good learning experience for me as a teacher and for them as students as well. We couldn't go on a field trip in 2020. So my year 10s, we decided we'd look at our courtyard. That's the view outside my classroom. To one side, and I see Brisbane City out to the other side of the classroom, but they were redeveloping this area. So the student was really clever in this particular assessment piece. We used data loggers to measure the temperature on the artificial grass. We found a swipe map where we used a news article, and we taught ourselves how to use the swipe map and put in a heat map across a playground that we found on a news site, and created a really interactive story map. We did environmental issues, climate change, all sorts of different. The next one is really exciting, Sea Shepherd. These are really great assignments that the students have really done. This is year 12, so these are the students now, and we did a field trip to Still on the Beach where we discovered E. coli in the lagoon behind the beach at 1,600 parts per 100 mil. And we had that scientifically tested, and the rate that Queensland government states that should be there is 40 parts per 100 mil. So we've discovered, we've made some assumptions that we have septic tanks in a sand profile back dune, and that's leaching down into the low point. And we use trace downstream to actually work that out, thanks to Jake from Esri Australia. We are doing some really interesting projects, and we're doing year 11 have just completed a project on Ebola in North Kivu, or they could do malaria in Kenya. And these worked out really, really well. We found some very regionally specific data that helped us with creating these really dynamic assessment pieces with the students. I moved on to history this year. So I'm teaching Australian Rights and Freedoms movement, and 2 of my year 10 students produced exceptionally good pieces of work. We found wage sheets for Wave Hill Station in the National Archives, and the students included them in his story map with some original information. Now, We use it a little bit differently. It's a teaching resource, it's a mapping platform, but it's an interactive assessment platform for me as well. I'm able to turn off their accounts when I'm assessing them so that they can't keep working on their assignments, so I can do that. And this is how we've embedded it throughout our curriculum. So 7 and 8, we use it in a number of different ways, 9 and 10, Bribie projects. And then you can see some of the projects there. But in senior geography, I use it extensively in the curriculum to create assessment pieces. And you can just see there, some of the work that these students do, if you haven't got time to go and have a look at them, is quite phenomenal. The field report and data collecting we're using now, and we're using drone footage on the site. And we're teaching ourselves how to map using the drones, and we've just become a lighthouse school with she maps here in Australia. These are some of the current projects that the students are working on. How does that work in my classroom? Well, it provides better student engagement and interest. Students value the skills they develop. Behaviour management problems are not an issue in my classroom. Skill sharing, student collaboration, all this works really positively in the classroom. Some successes and challenges, student success in both competitions, but also in their senior assessment outcomes have been outstanding. I've got a very supportive HOD. It's really important to be really resilient in the face of roadblocks when you're using technology, and this has been a real challenge for us. But we find workarounds, and we're really persistent to make sure that there's student engagement. We have really good industry support here with Esri Australia. We build networks, and the students' work is able to be presented on the Curriculum Authority network. I enter them in competitions, and these are some of my stars and my principal, or my ex-principal, he's just left. This is some of my students' responses when I speak to them outside and after school. We've got a health project officer here. We've got an environmental engineer in British Columbia now, urban planning student, environmental engineer. These are just some of the comments I get from my students after they've been through my classes. And it's really rewarding to see them go on and be productive members of our society. One of the things that I do a little bit differently is I use social media. I use LinkedIn, and that helps me build professional networks, seek out expertise. I can highlight student work, and it's really rewarding. Queensland Senior Geography teachers, we've created a Facebook page that's allowed us to share a lot of these resources as well, and that's really rewarding. Last year, I decided I was going to join the YouTube crowd, and I have a lot of short videos on how to embed spatial technologies into the Queensland curriculum, and that's worked really well. 2020 was a pretty good year for us. We only lost 5 weeks teaching, but we were showcased. We had some award-winning assignments using story maps. This year, we've become a lighthouse school. We continue to provide PD and help for other schools. We had 44 teachers from 22 schools come and do a GIS day with us. And there's my old high school at Kingaroy that I originally went to back in the, I think, late 70s. The last one here, this is my superstar student. The Curriculum Authority came out to my classroom and videotaped my class for a day, but Giselle currently works for the Department of Natural Resources in GIS. She's a GIS analyst. And that's a little 3-minute video that you could have a look at if you've got time. I'm available. I've got an email, StoryMap, LinkedIn, the QCA the Curriculum Authority videos there as well. And that's my story, and my students are the star of this story. Thanks, Jason.
Thanks for that, Brett. really impressive. It's the I think one of the things, one of the things that's well, a number of things. So I was just thinking about the your students being great advocates for you, in that they're having all that feedback.
Yeah,
And I think one of the things that's really missing, just globally, is that assessment piece. It's really hard. How do you assess this GIS work, these story maps, particularly when the exam boards are probably years behind where we are? So you can't, so you couldn't actually make a digital submission, for instance, or or a link or something like that. It's just really, it's a really tricky area. We should, Esri, and us probably globally, should be thinking about how do we help exam boards and examiners feel comfortable with this technology that they can assess it.
Yeah, they were blown away by so my submissions were MP4s, and they were blown away by the quality of the work, because we just put in printed up assignments for senior in the majority of the cases, but this was really, really rewarding to see. And now we've got a bit of a movement within the senior classes in Queensland. I think we'll see a lot more this year coming in as MP4s as story maps. So yeah.
Hopefully. Yeah. Okay, thanks for our speakers today, Aaron, Kate, and Brett. Rosemary, do we have any questions in the chat? I've seen some stuff going through, but I couldn't look at all of it.
Yeah, originally we had a question from Peter. It was answered, by Kate. The question was, how do you deal with student location privacy when you have a small sample size? You did answer it in the question, Kate, but I don't know if you want to talk about that.
Well, first off, that was a great point. And we're like, oh yeah, we need to think about this for next year. But there were some great suggestions in here as well about using the analysis function so that we can do a buffer and remove the center. That came from Shanna. And we also thought about how the teachers could manually move the points to a major intersection, or we could just, bring down the accuracy of the point just a bit and make it a little less obvious where they are. It didn't come up to us. So this is why you go to conferences, because you learn new things, right? So we'll definitely be doing that in year 2. Thank you.
Great. And Aaron, is there a way that we can access that wonderful story map of yours that you were showing us? Perhaps you can put that link in the chat.
Sure. Yeah, I will put in my link so that you can see all of my story map. Actually, I put it in within this sharing. Okay. Everyone, I think you can see my link of story map. Yep.
Great. And Brett, what are the social media apps that you used again? Would you let us all know?
Yeah, I use LinkedIn, YouTube, and we use Facebook as a group with the senior geographers. So they're the 3 main ones that I use, yeah.
Okay, great.
Yes, for me, what's really interesting for me, so we've got these sort of talks from all around the globe today in here, and I was seeing pictures from Aaron, your students going out using Survey 123. I've seen the same thing in the UK, in other parts of Europe, in Africa. I'm sure they're doing, in Australia as well, and in parts of the States. So we've got this suddenly got this growing sort of group of students who are experiencing geography and the world, and about collecting data and how to understand it and represent it in a sort of a fairly uniform, in a way that's actually makes it maybe interesting and interactive in there. And taking what Kate's piece in there, I like to start with the student. Because for me, what GIS does, it puts the student right in the center of all these things and the things happening around the student in there. And so we can start to ask them questions about themselves and about how they link to a different place and location, whether it's about who likes Brussels or, or you're sad or you're happy in there. But it's something that will engage them and they can go and work with. And I suppose in your institutions, Kate, Brett, and Aaron, are you the only people championing this, or do you have other people who are? Are your colleagues coming along and working with you on this, or are you lone stars?
We are not lone stars. We're lucky that Lehigh has a pretty robust GIS community with a variety of faculty from different programs, and the GIS specialist for our campus, that's Jeremy, the picture I put up. And we've bought out a little bit of his time on this grant, and we did on the last grant too, to make sure that he's part of it. So there are GIS courses on campus. The fact that we did this with other schools before, with another school before, has meant that it continues in that other school. Our hope is that the K-12 teachers, well, in this case, 9-12 teachers, will pick it up in the buildings as well. So we're not the lone wolves, but we are probably the ones that are doing the most with K-12 education for sure. That's the big difference, I think, with our group compared to some of the other folks who are doing stuff on the Lehigh campus.
Yeah, I think we were really creating the Teach with GIS site, which I'm just going to put into the window here, for students, for students and for teachers, just to get started and having that really sort of gentle on ramp into the technology. So you don't just go bang into a big wall of data and you don't quite know what's going on and you bounce out. So hopefully that's what that will do. So I think we are on time. So thank you, Aaron, Brett, and Kate again for some fantastic and really inspiring talks. Really, really appreciate it, particularly you, Brett. At a ridiculous amount of o'clock in the morning. And we will be sharing. This is recorded, and we'll also be sharing the materials around after this as well. So thank you very much, everybody, and see you in the next sessions. Bye-bye.
Thanks.